characteristics.
Well, let's bring in our Wednesday political panel. We've got the doctors in the house today, the Victorian Liberal MP Katie Allen and New South Wales Labor MP Mike Freelander. Thanks for your time today.
Hi, Jane.
Well, let's start with this bill. Katie Allen, on first reading, do you support it?
Yes, I think it's got the balance right. I have to say, I've had a lot of roundtables in my electorate over the last 2 years with regards to this bill, with religious leaders and the LGBTI community, because I've got a very large, vibrant, diverse LGBTI community, and of course, faith-based leaders. It's fair to say that faith-based leaders in Higgins are very progressive, and so they did tell me that they, feel that there is the issue of religious discrimination. Many of them didn't feel strongly they needed a bill for it, but there were some that felt very strongly that they needed a bill. And so if you have the argument about whether you need a bill or don't need a bill, if we go with we need a bill, this is the best bill, I think, that we could get. I think there's still a little bit more work to go on it, but I'm very proud of the fact that I've worked extremely hard with the Attorney-General to get some concessions, and the first one is the removal of the conscientious objection for the health provision. Now, that's really great.
Yeah, can you tell us what that would have done? If that provision remained in the bill, what would that have allowed health practitioners to do?
Well, as doctors, we have a professional code of conduct. And the way I see it is, as doctors, we have to have a very balanced, non-judgmental view and way that we act with patients. So what it's saying is you cannot discriminate. Even if you have a personal view, you cannot discriminate with your practice based on that religious view. So that's the sort of carve-out, and that's really important. So a doctor who says, I'm a Catholic and I don't believe in sex outside marriage, they still need to prescribe a pill for a single woman who is having sex outside marriage. And so that means that there's no conscientious objection on those sorts of issues. So if someone says, I don't believe in something religiously, they need to have that as a privately held view. They can't have it as a medical view, and it cannot affect their treatment. So that's actually a fantastic concession and has really big impact on making sure that this bill is a shield for those who hold a belief, not a sword that has actions and impacts on others. The second thing it's done is it's removed the Folau clause, which again is great, because this means that, again, it can't be used as a sword, it can only be used as a shield. And then there's a third issue, which is a statement of belief issue, and I think that's where a lot of the arguments and concerns are about. And I've had explained to me many times by the Attorney-General what the statement of belief means. It's about privately held beliefs. It's about your personal position. But the minute you impose that on somebody else through harassing, demeaning, malicious, or anything like that, if someone says, I don't like what you're saying, you cannot say that. That's a form of discrimination. Nor can you act on that. You cannot discriminate based on those views that you are holding. Therefore, you can't be calling out someone who has a different view on you with regards to sexuality. Okay, so that's where this kind of contest of different views is getting into contest.
And I just want to bring in Mike Freelander in just one moment, but just to pull you up on the statement of belief, are you worried though this could create a legal minefield because it's just open to interpretation?
Well, I think that's why I'm so pleased that this is another concession. People like me have called for it to go to a Senate inquiry. And that is because when I speak to the Attorney-General and to her staff, the intentions of the bill seem balanced and reasonable about protecting people and their faith. In fact, when we invite people to come to Australia at citizenship ceremony, and I'm sure you're the same, Mike, we say to people, bring your family, bring your faith, bring your language, bring your culture. We are a country that's very tolerant of different faiths. And so we're very tolerant of people holding a faith, and we're okay with them having that faith. As long as it doesn't break our laws or do things that we don't believe in as a nation, we're happy to have people to have a sense of faith. Okay. So it is getting that balance right. Yeah. But the thing is, with it going to the Senate inquiry, that will be very important to look at any unintended consequences, because the way it's been described to me and the way I've looked at the bill on the first draft, or the first look of it, I can't see any particular issues at the moment, but as we go forward, we'll see whether people can pull out issues that they find difficult, and that's why the Senate inquiry is very important to make sure the scrutiny is there, so there's no unintended consequences, that the intention of the bill is reflected in the legislation and the letter of the law of the bill.
Okay, well, Mike Freelander, let's bring you in. I don't know if you've had time to read the bill, it's pretty lengthy, but on first glance, do you support the notion of having a religious discrimination bill?
No, I don't. I think this is a very divisive issue. I think it's the Prime Minister playing politics And I think
Well, we did promise at the last election, I guess.
Yeah, but I've spoken to a lot of members on both sides of Parliament. Not one of them has been able to tell me they've had a constituent approach them about religious freedom and inability to practice their religion. Katie's right. In Australia, we have had religious freedom for hundreds of years, and this is very likely to cause a lot of division. It's very likely to be discriminatory. It's very likely to cause a lot of angst among a whole range of communities. And I think that this is just simply the Prime Minister being divisive and playing politics. And really, I think it's a solution trying to find a problem to fix. And I think it's very complex. I think that it's been presented to us with very little time to even discuss. This is the first draft. Obviously, it's not the final draft of the legislation that will go to Parliament. If it is going to come to Parliament, there needs to be much more discussion, much more review. But to me, I'm afraid I know that some religious groups feel that it's necessary. I think they've failed to provide the evidence that it really is necessary. Katie's mentioned the Folau clause. Well, no one more than me would love to see Israel Folau playing rugby for Australia. He was a great player, probably about the third best player I've ever seen, Mark Ella being the second best and Jonah Loma being the best if you're interested. But they've removed that clause altogether. And, I just think it's another evidence of the Prime Minister being divisive, playing politics.
Well, what do you say to the argument that we have laws covering racial discrimination and sex discrimination, so this would just be an extension of that?
Yeah, well, look, I think a lot of the discrimination that may be implied can be covered by other laws. I just don't see it as being a practical problem. I'd much rather the government brought forward some legislation to do with a federal ICAC with teeth. That's really important. I'd much rather see the government bring forward the mitochondrial disorders legislation.
That is coming forward next week.
Well, we hope so. It's supposed to come forward on Monday, but it's not. And I think it's much more important that there are other things, more important things to do.
Yep.
This is divisive, it's complex, there needs to be far more discussion.
Labor is sort of considering supporting it, though.
Yes,
and I just want to ask you, as a member from Western Sydney, Concetta Fierravanti-Wells was just saying a moment ago that the sense that the Coalition picked up at the last election was that this was an issue that people in Western Sydney and multicultural communities really cared about. What do you think?
Look, I've not seen any evidence of that, and I have a very diverse electorate with, Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, Jews like me, Anglicans of all varieties, fundamentalist Christians, a whole range of religions. No one has ever approached my office claiming that discrimination on a religious basis.
It's a very interesting perspective. Katie Allen, one of the concerns that has been raised is about, so the schools, religious schools, would be given the power to, positively discriminate. So effectively, in their hiring practices, prioritise the hiring of people who share their religion. There are concerns this will extend to those schools discriminating against people on the basis of their marital status, their sexuality. Can this bill enable that?
I don't think it can.
And so I suppose if you've got your own colleagues questioning this, Trent Zimmerman, one of them, Equality Australia is another one. Do you not think you can? What's the assurance you've been given?
I heard Trent this morning talking about it, and he wasn't able to answer the question. And I actually rang him up and spoke to him about it, because my understanding is that they can't, because it's a form of discrimination. No, my interpretation of the bill is that. So you said you haven't looked at the bill, Mike, so perhaps you should...
I've looked at it very briefly. But
I've looked at it in depth. And my understanding, my reading of the bill is that you cannot.
Open to discussion.
And is that an issue, though, that we don't have the Attorney-General, Michaelia Cash, actually out there sort of telling us what's in the bill? I mean, I understand the bill is out there, but I'm not a lawyer, for example. I can't sort of go through line by line and see what might happen or might not happen. Where's Michaelia Cash in all of this?
Well, I have to say Michaelia has been consulting extremely widely, including with Equality Australia, and she
hasn't discussed it with the opposition.
Well, she's widely canvassed views right across the community with faith-based leaders, with Equality Australia, with members of Parliament. Clearly she has to now do that with you. But I think she has been doing a lot of consultation. And I think it's important that people digest the bill and have a look at it. I don't want to see any unintended consequences. So at this point in time, you know, it's on the table. It only landed yesterday. Mike's right. We still need a lot of discussion and debate to go ahead. And I think that's, you know, what's good about the Australian democracy.
Okay, I'm just going to finish on another thorny topic, vaccine mandates. We've seen a number of your coalition colleagues very much, you know, in protest against them this week. But I just wanted to ask you on your medical opinion as well as politicians. Mike, do you think vaccine mandates are the way to go to boost vaccine rates?
Look, I believe in vaccine mandates in certain circumstances. I still do some work in our local hospital. I'm mandated to be vaccinated against COVID-19 as well as influenza and some of the other common infectious diseases like measles. I have no problem with that at all. Because
have some states gone a bit far in how broad they are mandated?
I think people should be following their health advice and following our public health experts in where vaccine mandates are appropriate and where they're not. And I think that's very important. Mm-hmm. In paediatrics, we have an issue now with the vaccination of children for COVID-19, and I think that is open for discussion. And I think
would you back that?
In some circumstances, I will. Children with disabilities and comorbidities, I certainly think, should be vaccinated for COVID-19 in special schools and those situations because we know they're at high risk. For younger children, I think there's still more evidence that needs to be taken, but you know, I back vaccine mandates in situations where other people's lives are at risk. In some businesses, for example, abattoirs and things like that, I think is quite reasonable because we know COVID can spread in those close working relationships. In other places, it may not be appropriate, but we should always follow the public health advice. And as I said, in health situations, I have absolutely no problem with mandated vaccines. I am in that situation myself, and I am vaccinated.
All right, and Katie Allen, sorry, quick answer from you. The Human Rights Commissioner is sitting to suggest that some broad-based mandates needed to be justified, needed to be proportionate. Where do you sit?
I agree with that. I mean, I think, you know, I'm like Mike. I've said from the very start that there are certain high-risk situations where you need to protect others, which is health, disability, quarantine, hotels, but also aged care. Absolutely. But that's not mandating the whole population. Just remember that people who are vaccinated are protected. So the unvaccinated are making a choice to be unprotected. So in some ways, from the point of view of covering the whole population, it's kind of a moot point because we've already got 85% first dose and 91% second dose. So Australia's kind of done a mandated vaccination. They've got together, we've worked together to get our arms forward and to get vaccinated. So I think it's become a bit of a moot point, but we do want to make sure that we protect Australians. That's absolutely true. And unvaccinated people are the ones that are ending up in hospital. So anyone watching this, please go and get your vaccination.
Absolutely.
All right,
Well
Katie
said,
Allen,
Katie.
Mike Freelander, always a fascinating topic discussion with you two. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jane.